Olivia and Daniel Grant seemed like the perfect couple, wealthy, admired, and enviable to everyone around them. But behind closed doors, the smiles, the luxury, and the seemingly perfect life hid a web of secrets, control, and deadly obsession. That would shatter their world forever. Olivia and Daniel Grant were admired by nearly everyone who knew them. They had the kind of life that looked like it belonged on the glossy pages of a magazine. Their home, a large brick house with white shutters and a manicured lawn, stood proudly on a quiet street where every neighbor seemed to envy them. They drove luxury cars that gleamed in the sunlight, attended the best dinners in town, and hosted parties where laughter filled the rooms and wine flowed without end. At every gathering, Daniel held Olivia's hand tightly, and her smile seemed to confirm to the world that their bond was unshakable. To their community, they represented love, success, and stability, the dream everyone wished they could have, yet beneath the polished surface, Olivia felt a growing distance from the man who once made her feel alive. When they first married, Daniel had been charming, attentive, and endlessly supportive of her. He built his company from the ground up, and she stood proudly at his side as he climbed the ladder of success. Together, they built a life of luxury, but as Daniel's work consumed more of his time, Olivia found herself alone in the grand house they had worked so hard to afford. Days stretched into weeks of loneliness, broken only by Daniel's occasional grand gestures, expensive gifts meant to substitute for his presence. The jewelry sparkled, the trips dazzled, but none of it filled the quiet ache that grew inside her. Daniel, on the other hand, thrived on the image they projected. He believed in perfection and worked tirelessly to ensure the world saw them as flawless. He insisted their clothes be immaculate, their manners pristine, their smiles constant. He noticed every detail, whether Olivia's hair was styled, whether her tone seemed cheerful enough, whether her behavior matched the image he wanted to uphold. He lived not just for success but for control, and behind every smile he displayed to the world was a determination to keep everything in its proper place. For him, Olivia was the centerpiece of the life he had built, the jewel that confirmed his triumph. He could not imagine her existing outside of the role he had created for her. As the years passed, Olivia began to feel as though she was living in a carefully constructed cage. From the outside, people admired the way Daniel adored her, but she knew how much of that adoration was built on expectation. When she showed signs of independence, he grew cold. When she wanted to pursue her own passions, he redirected her toward causes that would reflect well on them as a couple. Slowly, she stopped recognizing the woman she had once been, the one who had dreams, ambitions, and laughter that wasn't rehearsed. She became the woman in the photographs, smiling because it was required, shining because Daniel demanded it. Their friends never noticed. To them, Olivia and Daniel were perfect. They were the couple everyone else compared themselves to at dinner parties, the example of what a marriage should be. But perfection, Olivia knew, came at a price. Every day, she buried her doubts a little deeper, hiding them behind flawless makeup and a carefully chosen dress. She told herself it was only a phase, that one day she would feel whole again, but deep inside she knew the life she was living was only an illusion. What no one realized was how fragile that illusion really was. It only took one small crack, a look that lingered too long, a question left unanswered, a moment when her mask slipped, for Daniel to notice. And once he noticed, he never let go. The admiration of neighbors, the envy of friends, the glossy surface of their marriage was nothing more than a performance, and the stage was beginning to shake beneath them. The perfect marriage everyone praised was not built on love and trust but on appearances and control, and that was a foundation destined to collapse. Olivia's loneliness had deepened over the years, growing like a shadow she could not shake. The house that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a prison, its large rooms echoing with the absence of genuine companionship. While Daniel immersed himself in his work, traveling to meetings and networking events, Olivia filled her days with charity work and social clubs. She painted walls at community centers, organized fundraisers, and attended gallery openings, but none of it quieted the emptiness she felt. Each evening, she returned to the grand house, the silence pressing down on her, and the sparkling exterior of their life offered no comfort. Even the luxury that surrounded her, the finely polished floors, the carefully arranged furniture, the expensive artwork adorning the walls, felt hollow without someone to share it with. It was during her volunteer work at a local non-profit that Olivia met him, a man whose presence made her heart race in a way she hadn't felt in years. He was attentive, kind, and genuinely interested in her thoughts and feelings. They would cross paths at charity events, exchanging smiles and polite conversation at first. Gradually, these encounters grew longer and more personal. Olivia found herself lingering after meetings, seeking his opinions, sharing small frustrations and secret joys. What began as casual friendship became a lifeline, a connection that filled the void she had learned to ignore. She became careful about it, hiding messages, deleting calls, and managing her schedule to avoid suspicion. To her, it was harmless, an emotional refuge from a marriage that had grown cold. Daniel, however, was no stranger to intuition and suspicion. His control extended beyond appearances. He had learned to notice the smallest shifts in behavior, the subtle flickers of emotion that slipped past ordinary observation. He noticed Olivia's frequent absences, the faint smile that lingered when she spoke about her volunteer work, and the way her eyes seemed to light up at times he did not anticipate. Without confrontation, he began to follow her schedule closely. He would check her calendar, monitor phone activity, and even casually inquire about her plans, using his curiosity as a mask for the deeper investigation that had begun. To the casual observer, Daniel remained the devoted husband, but beneath the surface, he was constructing a map of her life that would one day reveal more than she intended. The tension between them grew, invisible to the neighbors who still admired the couple. At home, small arguments became more frequent. Olivia would retreat into silence, and Daniel would respond with subtle pressure, asking questions, suggesting activities, or creating expectations that seemed reasonable but were meant to gauge her loyalty. Olivia, unaware of how closely he was watching, continued her secret friendship, believing she could maintain the balance without consequence. She convinced herself that she was careful, that no one could detect the emotional space she had carved out for herself. Yet Daniel's eyes missed nothing, and the shadow of suspicion was slowly turning into a tangible threat. As the months passed, the strain of maintaining appearances began to wear on Olivia. She continued smiling in public, attending events, and hosting dinner parties, all while hiding the truth of her heart. The dual life she led, the perfect wife in the eyes of the world and the secret friend who gave her solace, was exhausting. Every interaction with Daniel became a careful negotiation, every word measured, every glance calculated. She began to feel the weight of the deception pressing down on her, but the emptiness inside was stronger than the fear of being discovered. By the time winter approached, both Olivia and Daniel had settled into routines that masked the storm, growing beneath their polished lives. Daniel's suspicion simmered quietly, a slow-building tension that no one else could see. Olivia's secret friendship had become essential to her survival, her only escape from a marriage that demanded perfection. The illusion remained intact to the outside world, but the cracks inside were deepening. Every day, the balance between control and freedom, observation and secrecy, grew more precarious. In the quiet corners of their home and the whispered conversations behind closed doors, the stage was set for a confrontation that neither could fully anticipate, and the picture-perfect life they had presented to the world was beginning to unravel. From within. As autumn deepened, the tension inside the Brown household began to feel almost tangible. Daniel's suspicion had transformed from a quiet worry into a restless obsession. Every glance Olivia cast, every movement she made, seemed to him a clue, a fragment of a hidden life he was desperate to uncover. He scrutinized her routines, memorized her friends' names, and noted every instance when her attention wandered from him. To Daniel, the perfect image he had built was fragile, and he was determined to protect it at any cost. Each day that passed without clarity only fueled a sense of unease, and the once celebrated confidence he carried began to give way to a darker, more controlling energy. Olivia, on her part, remained blissfully unaware of the full extent of Daniel's surveillance. She had learned to measure her movements carefully, to disguise the subtle excitement she felt during her secret encounters. The man she confided in provided a warmth that Daniel no longer offered, a simple presence that made her feel alive again. She began to plan small excursions under the guise of volunteering, careful to return before Daniel could notice any irregularities. But the closer she grew to this hidden connection, the more unaware she was of the storm brewing around her. The very freedom she cherished had become a dangerous gamble. One misstep away from discovery point one cold evening, Daniel decided to confront his unease in a way he believed was controlled and meticulous. He didn't confront Olivia directly. He never had the courage to reveal the storm of suspicion that had overtaken him. Instead, he began collecting evidence. He followed her discreetly on errands, took note of phone calls she received, and even examined the receipts she left behind. Each piece of information, each small observation, became a thread in the web he was quietly weaving. To the outside world, Daniel was calm, even gracious, maintaining the appearance of the devoted husband who worried for his wife's well-being. But inside, a dangerous calculation was taking shape. Meanwhile, Olivia's secret life grew bolder. She began scheduling meetings that stretched longer, taking small walks after volunteer sessions that were never mentioned. Every moment felt like a small victory, a rebellion against the life she had been forced to lead. She believed she had mastered the balance, confident that Daniel's attention was elsewhere, that his concerns were a distant echo rather than a looming threat. What she did not realize was that the gap between her perception and Daniel's observation was closing, and with each day, the risk grew exponentially. Then, one night in late November, the carefully maintained equilibrium collapsed. Neighbors later reported hearing unusual sounds emanating from the Grants' home, noises that were strange for a household known for its quiet routine. Moments later, Olivia was gone. When Daniel stepped outside, he told neighbors she had left after an argument, projecting an air of distress and helplessness. To anyone observing, it seemed plausible, a sudden departure after a heated discussion. But for those who looked closer, the inconsistencies were troubling. Surveillance footage from nearby streets showed no sign of Olivia leaving, and her phone was found abandoned in the home. Small traces, once insignificant, now began to paint a disturbing picture. Inside the house, silence took on a new meaning. The rooms that once echoed with laughter and conversation now felt oppressive and empty. Every carefully placed object, every decoration, seemed to serve as a reminder of what had been lost or hidden. The house, a symbol of success and perfection, had become a stage for something far darker. As investigators later pieced together the events of that night, it became clear that the cracks in the Grant marriage had turned into a chasm, one that could no longer be bridged by appearances, explanations, or the illusion of love. The world outside remained unaware, still seeing the perfect couple, but within those walls, the danger that had been simmering for months had finally erupted, setting the stage for revelations that would shock everyone who thought they truly knew Olivia and Daniel Grant. When Olivia failed to return the following morning, concern rippled through the neighborhood. At first, Daniel appeared the grieving husband, speaking to friends and neighbors with carefully measured emotion. He described her absence as sudden and inexplicable, a brief argument the night before that had apparently driven her to leave. People believed him, reassured by his public display of worry and the polished image he continued to maintain. His grief seemed genuine, his distress convincing. But behind the carefully curated performance, Daniel was observing every reaction, calculating every word, and monitoring every detail with the precision of someone who knew far more than he let on. Investigators began their work quietly at first, treating Olivia's disappearance as a possible voluntary departure. They interviewed friends, colleagues, and neighbors, attempting to piece together her last known movements. Nothing in their accounts suggested fear or conflict severe enough to make her leave abruptly. Yet as detectives examined the Grants' home, subtle inconsistencies began to emerge. Surveillance footage showed Olivia entering the house but never leaving. Her car remained in the driveway. Personal items that would normally accompany a sudden departure, her phone, her keys, her wallet, were all still in the home. Each detail contradicted Daniel's narrative, raising suspicion that something far more sinister had occurred. Financial records added another layer of complexity. Daniel's recent purchases, once unremarkable, now appeared suspicious in context. Receipts for cleaning supplies, unusually large quantities of everyday items, and tools that had no clear explanation seemed to suggest preparation rather than routine. Investigators noted that these items had been bought in the days leading up to Olivia's disappearance, prompting a closer examination of his activities during that period. Each discovery, small on its own, began to weave a picture of planning and premeditation that stood in stark contrast to the image of a devoted husband left bewildered by his wife's sudden departure. Meanwhile, neighbors started to share their own observations, details they had once considered trivial. Several recalled muffled arguments late at night, a sharp contrast to the smiling couple they thought they knew. Others remembered noticing Olivia's occasional anxiety, a subtle tension that had seemed minor at the time. The combination of physical evidence, financial anomalies, and eyewitness accounts began to create an uncomfortable suspicion. The perfect marriage everyone admired might have been a carefully maintained facade, hiding something darker beneath. The surface.as investigators dug deeper. The inconsistencies in Daniel's story became impossible to ignore. He maintained his composure in public, continuing to speak with the same charm and precision that had earned him admiration in social circles. Yet behind closed doors, the cracks in his narrative were widening. Interviews with close friends revealed contradictions and half-truths. Timeline discrepancies emerged between his accounts and the evidence collected from phone records and surveillance footage. Every attempt he made to maintain the illusion of innocence only seemed to tighten the investigators' focus on him. The house itself became a crucial element in the unfolding investigation. What had once been a symbol of success, love, and social perfection now revealed a chilling layer of reality. Forensic teams found traces of blood hidden beneath recently polished floors, items that had been deliberately concealed, and signs of tampering with the home structure. The polished veneer of the Grant's life, so carefully maintained for appearances, could no longer hide the underlying truth. By the time weeks had passed, the image of a devoted husband pleading for his wife's safe return had completely fractured. Daniel, once admired for his ambition and charisma, was now the focus of suspicion, the subject of quiet whispers in the neighborhood and tense scrutiny by law enforcement. The perfect marriage that everyone had envied was no longer untouchable. It was exposed as a construct, a fragile illusion built on control, manipulation, and fear. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that the life Daniel and Olivia had presented to the world was far removed from the reality hidden within the walls of their home, and that the truth, when revealed, would be far more chilling than anyone could have imagined. As the investigation intensified, the grim reality behind the Grants' seemingly perfect life began to emerge. Every layer of their carefully constructed image peeled away to reveal a marriage consumed by obsession, control, and ultimately, violence. For months, Daniel had maintained the facade of a grieving husband, yet forensic evidence, eyewitness accounts, and financial records painted a far darker picture. The house, once admired for its elegance, became a repository of secrets, each room holding traces of the night Olivia vanished. Investigators discovered her belongings hidden in the garage, her phone deliberately destroyed, and subtle stains of blood beneath freshly polished floors, silent witnesses to the violence that had taken place behind closed doors. The evidence linked directly to Daniel, confirming what suspicion had already suggested. He had orchestrated a calculated plan, one designed to punish Olivia for seeking freedom outside the confines of the marriage he so meticulously controlled. Friends and neighbors were shocked as the truth unfolded. The man they had praised for his charm, discipline, and devotion had been harboring a dangerous side, one that had turned his obsession with perfection into a lethal force. The admiration that had surrounded the couple evaporated almost overnight, replaced by fear and disbelief. People began to question everything they had assumed about the life they envied, realizing that the glossy exterior had masked a horrifying reality. In court, prosecutors detailed the methodical nature of Daniel's actions. They describe how he had monitored Olivia for weeks, tracking her every movement, noting every interaction, and gradually constructing a scenario where her freedom would be eliminated entirely. The meticulous nature of the evidence, the purchases of cleaning supplies, the tampering with a home, and the destruction of evidence demonstrated a chilling premeditation that left no room for doubt. To the jury, the image of the perfect husband dissolved entirely, replaced by a portrait of a man who saw control as a right and love as a possession to be secured at any cost. Throughout the proceedings, the duality of Daniel's life became evident. Publicly, he remained composed, maintaining the charm and precision that had once earned admiration. Privately, he was exposed as a man driven by jealousy, pride, and the need for absolute control. Friends who had once celebrated the couple's milestones were forced to confront the truth. They had been witnessing the performance of a man consumed by his own obsession, a man willing to destroy the person closest to him to preserve an image. The courtroom became a stage for this revelation, each piece of evidence unmasking the illusion of perfection that had captivated a community for years. When the verdict was announced, Daniel was found guilty of murder. The illusion that had defined his life, the carefully curated exterior of wealth, charm, and devotion, was shattered forever. The sentence brought closure to some, but the story of Olivia and Daniel Grant became a cautionary tale, a grim reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that even the most enviable lives can conceal the darkest truths. Investigators reflected on the signs that had been overlooked, the small cracks in the marriage that could have warned others, and the consequences of ignoring the hidden turmoil behind a polished facade. The legacy of the Grants lingered in the neighborhood and in the minds of those who had once admired them. The house remained, its elegance now a haunting reminder of the violence that had occurred within its walls. Neighbors spoke quietly of the couple, no longer with admiration but with a sense of unease and reflection. Olivia's absence became a silent echo, a symbol of the fragility of trust and the danger of placing appearances above reality. The story of Daniel's obsession and Olivia's tragic fate endured as a chilling example of how control, secrecy, and pride can transform the illusion of a perfect marriage into a deadly reality, leaving a community to grapple with the shocking truth that sometimes the most beautiful lives hide the darkest secrets.